we're basically working on the outline of immigration law as it was enacted in 1965. So it's not a surprise that it doesn't really work all that well for America. Basically, immigration is divided in two big buckets. One is family ties. For example, if you are an American citizen and you marry somebody from another country, you can ask that your spouse become a legal resident, and eventually they could apply to become a citizen. There are categories that are not immediate relatives, like spouses and children, minor children and parents, that are set into categories. For example, siblings or married children, adult children, sort of thing. So those are all in categories, and some of them are backed up. There's an overall limit to who can be brought in. And on the other big bucket is employment-based. And the idea is you have to do advertising and prove that the person that you are trying to employ, who's from another country, is doing a job you can't find an American to do. The problem is there are overall limits, and the limits are distributed per country in addition to per category, and they haven't been adjusted, half century almost. So they don't work that well. For example, you have people with PhDs in very arcane subjects that companies here need, and they can't find somebody with that expertise in AI. But if they're born in India, they can't ever get a visa. I mean, that doesn't really serve the interests of the United States. We need to adjust that. We also need to take a look at a more dynamic system, because the set amount of people coming in on the employment side is the same every year. And that doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. There are times when we have a real unemployment crisis. That is not necessarily a time when you need a lot of people to come in and be immigrants to fill jobs. But there are also times when you have a huge need for a workforce and you cannot meet that need. We also have an asylum and refugee program that needs reform right now. And you've seen kind of this disorder at the border. That's a product of not actually reforming our refugee policies and our asylum policies, as well as our temporary work permit policies. Some of the people at the border are fleeing from communism. They're fleeing from violence that's been directed at them. But some of the people at the border are actually want to come here because they need money. There's poverty at home. They want to get a job. There's nothing wrong with that, but they need to come legally, except there's no legal way for them to come. And so we should update our temporary visa programs. I'm the author with other Democrats and Republicans on the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. And that's a really important bill that may have a chance of actually becoming law because it is so bipartisan. Half the farm workers roughly in the United States are here without their immigration documents. If they all left, we wouldn't eat. So, we need to address that issue so people who are farm workers, who are working hard and are necessary for the United States can do that legally, and the bill does that. There's a temporary worker program called the H-2A program. It's very bureaucratic, and it doesn't really serve the employers, but as we got into it, it also doesn't necessarily serve the workers. It's bureaucratic, but it doesn't actually provide protection for the workforce. It just provides rigmarole. So working with, and it took us almost 9 months, the agricultural employers and the United Farm Workers Union, we came up with a detailed plan that everybody agreed on. That's kind of remarkable. And that's why it passed the House of Representatives twice. Went to the Senate did nothing. We hope to introduce it maybe next week or soon. And we're talking to the senators to see if we can't finally get them to act, because there's broad agreement, growers and workers, that this bill should pass.
How does DACA fit in?
These DACA's recipients are the beneficiaries of something done in the Obama administration, where if you were brought to this country as a child, it wasn't your decision. You lived here, grown up here, in most cases, you're an American in every way but your paperwork. But there's no way for you to become legal. And it's not good for the individuals, but it's also not good for our country. So President Obama administratively gave them relief from deportation and the capacity to work and go to school, but he couldn't, because only Congress can make the laws, he could not give them legal status. The DREAM Act takes it one step further for these young people to actually get their legal residence. We've passed it several times when the Democrats were in the majority to the Senate. We had, I think, 10 Republicans voted with us the last time it was sent to the Senate. And we reintroduced it actually yesterday in the House of Representatives. But there's a difference between hope and expectation. I'm hopeful this will pass, but given the rhetoric by the now chairman of the Judiciary Committee and the now chair of the Immigration Subcommittee, they're very anti-immigrant, and I think there's very little hope, although I never give up hope. There's another bill that I introduced with support that updates a provision of the Immigration Act that's been in part of the act since 1929. And the theory is this: in 1929, you've got people who are here, their paperwork isn't in order, but they are here, they're contributing to America, they have clean records, and after a period of time that they can prove, their good character, that they could register and stay here legally.
And it would allow people who have been in the country for 7 years to create a pathway for them to become residents. And
yes, to become residents. And
now,
that doesn't give citizenship. I mean, legal residents, the United States, have the ability after 5 years as a resident, 3 if you're married to a U.S. citizen, and 1 if you served in the U.S. military, to apply to become a citizen. But legal residence is a legal status so that you can legally live and work in the United States.
Now, some people might argue that people might take advantage of that and cross or get into the country illegally, wait 7 years, and then go through that because it is so difficult to, I guess, would go like the legal way of obtaining either residency here in the United States.
Yeah, the starting of a bill is the beginning, not the end. But I do think that we have large numbers of people who are here without documents, which is not a good thing. People should be legally immigrating, but there's no pathway to do it.
What do you think is the appropriate control of way to manage the border?
Right now, we are spending more on immigration reform, immigration enforcement than any other federal law enforcement, combined. So it's not as if there's a lack of effort to try and enforce lawful entry at the border. The Biden administration has taken several steps to encourage people to apply for a pathway that's lawful rather than just surge at the border. And consequently, the numbers of people trying to cross unlawfully have plummeted dramatically, 70%. Now, there's still people there, and it's not what we should have. But part of the solution is not just enforcement at the border, but it's reforming the law so people can comply. I don't condone people not conforming with the requirements of the law, but I do understand when people become desperate. And I know people, and I've met people where their spouse hasn't been able to get an interview at a consulate for, 2 or 3 years when their American citizen spouse is petitioned. And finally, they come over. Well, is that the right thing legally? No, it's not. But the laws don't trump marital vows, actually. And so you see some of that going on. One of the things, going back to the Farm Workforce Modernization Act, it's a comprehensive immigration reform of the entire agricultural sector. And one of the things I insisted on was that we put something in called E-Verify, which is you can't work unless you're legally here, and we do verification. Because if you have a legal system, you ought to enforce it. It's just that right now, we don't have a system that works for the United States or the people who are in the United States. And I'm looking forward to a time where every immigrant is lawfully entering and lawfully present.